Okay, welcome and to this weird, virtual situation that a film festival has become nowadays. And we're here with Johannes Gierlinger, which is one of the two authors that is screened as a profile in the Fuori Formato section for Filmmaker Festival. And thanks, Johannes, for being with us and for giving us some time to talk about your works. And I'd like to ask you something about actually how you came to filmmaking, and I'll tell you why. And I mean, because we included one of your first short films in our program, which is Vision of Traces, and but what was striking to me, at least really interesting and compelling about your cinema, was that having been dedicating some time to, Austrian cinemas in the recent years in the festival, it came really like from somewhere else, in a way, most of your films. And actually these starting points, these shorts that I see seem in a way more related to some kind of experimental film tradition with found footage and film manipulation. So, and there's a reason also I wanted to keep this particular film, Vision of Traces. But I wanted to know exactly what was your path leading to filmmaking and with this starting, and then also how you took some kind of different path, which seems to, not that you don't have a national tradition of this, but seems more related also to a more European tradition of essay films. I can recall authors like Chris Marquet, Jean-Luc Godard, I don't know, Jean Rouch, Arun Farocki, maybe.
Basically, it started, I started quite late to work on film, or basically, I started in a very classical media school to learn basics, and I found it quite strange that in this school I was really critical with the thing how media are produced, and it was a media school for TV and stuff like that. And then I went to Vienna, and I started to study on the Academy of Fine Arts, and there was a very different background and a more theoretical thinking about film itself. And this was where I started basically thinking about film more than just do it on just making film. And it's true, the first films I made were very much based on the, let's say, found footage tradition in Austria, which was influential for me, like Tchaikovsky and all the found footage filmmakers that are around there. But then I had the feeling what I missed the most was going out with the camera and filming my own material, which became at that point even more interesting when I started to film on 60mm, and that gave me a kind of limitation of material of why I shoot, how I shoot. So it was a shift, and I really never went really back to material film, basically. I think I made 3 films like that, and then I had the feeling okay, the material itself is important on one hand, but it's not so important as or let's say it's important on the one hand, but I need the material to shoot myself. So, but you're also right, maybe regarding the tradition, because I think that's true in Austria. There's a different way of, let's say, documentary approach than we have or can see maybe around Europe in, let's say, in France or even in Germany, like Arun Farocki. And I was very challenged, or it challenged me a lot when I saw the first films of Marker or Godard, basically. So I had the feeling this is something that is really within making the film, also questioning how you make it and what you see and how you. So it's a critique on the image, and I think in Austria sometimes there's more a tradition of direct cinema tradition.
Yeah, and yeah, but still, there was something that I was interested about this short film, Vision of Traces, which was exactly beside the process of, working on the footage and removing the images, but it was this idea of traces that was, on the film in a way, that the traces of images that remain on the film, but it's in the title, and it seems to me that it's quite an important concept in your method, in the way of working that you develop, because I see, like, also in your description, when you talk about your work, you often talk about this research of this pure and this research of traces. And so maybe to see better how you went on with your work, I would be asking what exactly this entails, because to me, this is already something that relates to, the research. So what you prepare before the film, which would be studying and reading, but it's also, research is something that it's moving away in a way. And I think traveling is quite an important part of your practice. And then there's also, then the idea of traces itself, which is so always something like a remain, something like a ruin, something that you need to gather and order in a way and read. So this entails also, what comes after the filming, the shooting itself. So how then you work with montage. It's quite a wide ranging question in a way, but it's maybe we can start to talking about, we're not screening your first feature film. The 14 You Seek is in another cookie, because it's already also been screened in Milan. But that's probably, the starting point for this kind of approach. But then it's something that we can see also, in the following films, like a subsequent fulfillment of a prehistoric wish, or the Ordnung der Träume, and the order of vision.
Yeah, it's you're right. Although the very, very short vision of traces is a found footage, it's still about traces, which I was always interested. But maybe it's comes more from an interest in history itself, like. Where do things come from, and what do we see from do we see in the present from these historical events, or even, and on the other side also, how do these historical events still influence the present, or how does the present suddenly change the past, or not the past itself, but we talk about it. So like Benjamin, for example, said, we have to I just know it in German, wir müssen die Vergangenheit vor der Gegenwart schützen. So it means we have to protect the past from the present, because you shape new narratives. And I'm interested in this, in more like which traces are visible, and how do these traces maybe are, there are new layers of on it, and maybe you just have to dig deeper. So you're right, it starts already at this film, although it is without language, and which came later, basically, when I thought, like, when I make films, there are different layers which are important for me. It's the image, the sound, and the voiceover, or like an interview, but it basically all together is something that is very important for me, and structure my kind of editing also. And as you said, like, for example, it was a strange kind of way of beginning, let's say, making essayistic films, because I started with a feature. Before I didn't make really an essayistic film, but I started with The Fortune You Seek is in Another Cookie in around 2011, 12 maybe. And it just came out that, it's a kind of a road trip also in a way, but it's also like mixing up different kind of places and try to find in these places, let's say, something that we can call happiness in the one hand, but also like traces, or how you negotiate with all this kind of thought about being happy, and it's a difficult word, happy, but on the other hand, I think it's what revolves around human life a lot. So but and then, as you also said, like it's true. You can see all this kind of thoughts of digging into kind of layers of history or historical events or past. It's really in all my films. It's very present. In some, maybe in a more documentary character. Let's say like in the film, the latest Remapping the Origins, where it became more like because before I made a film called the Ordnung der Träume, and there it was the first time I really tried something more like fictional, combining with documentary aesthetics, but also with voiceover. So, and I thought like, okay, the next film I want to go again and start what I learned basically first, and that was having a documentary approach and going out and really use this kind of documentary approach to make a film. So it's always coming like waves sometimes, and I come back and say like, okay, now I need some fictional parts again. Yeah.
As you were mentioning also about your first feature, I mean, what is remarkable in your works, and looks to me like it's also must be a very engaging and long process, is how you start. I don't know exactly actually how you start. If you start more with images and places, or more, but you start always also with these like quite big ideas and concept and questions about the world. So I mean, the idea of happiness, or in the Ordnung der Träume, it's still a film about dreams, city, the imaginary, but it's like this. It's questioning about the contemporary world and the world we live in, and you still like wavering between these questions that you then re-elaborate probably in the montage and in the writing of the text, which I would be interested also to know how and when do you start like maybe elaborating these thoughts, and then the particular, from this big universal question to the particular and to what you find. And it's true that, you play on several layering. For example, also in the Ordnung der Träume, you have this also fictional part that still complicated more. It doesn't really help to fix the thing, but they're always moving, away from the text. And then you have also, the relationship between the images that you took and that you shot and the text, that it's always, in this kind of balance, which is, analogy. I don't know. It's something that it's always, going away and taking us somewhere else in a way. And I think this is really interesting. But maybe I'd like to talk more about the Ordnung der Träume, which I think it's really kind of, I don't know, but it's, I would say, more theoretical film in many ways, and for this kind of approach. And for example, you have some interesting references that some are explicit, like Calvino, Invisible Cities, and another one is Sartre, the Imaginaire, and also, of course, Walter Benjamin, and with the main question of what is the true revolutionary gesture today, if it's about waking up the dream or letting the dreamer dream. So how these kind of also theoretical references are then, how you end up, for example, shooting and searching for this kind of confrontation also in somewhere else, like in India.
Well, basically it's different with all films, but in most films there's kind of an impact for me. Like, for example, I just go back to the first film. It was really a quote by Bertolt Brecht, like, everyone runs after happiness, but happiness is always a step behind. And this was really like, okay, I think I will want to work on this in a way. But this is really, I just shorten it down. For the Ordnung der Träume, it's really different. There is like the main influence was Italo Calvino, The Invisible City. When I read it, I had the feeling this is, or he's also saying it, that basically he talks always about the same city. And I found it quite interesting that it's so diverse and every city is so different, but maybe it's also, you talk about the same city because it's an imagination. So it was basically on the text, and the text was important for the fictional character parts mostly. So I was writing basically a script that is that involves Calvino and thoughts also about Sartre's Das Imaginäre and Benjamin in that sense also. And then I knew I will have this residency in India, and I want to find a kind of way to combine or to bring cities together that are on the one hand imaginary, in this film at least. And I found a lot of similarities, or at least in the film was shot in Varanasi. And when you step around Varanasi, you feel a little bit like, well, it's maybe just for an Austrian, but a little bit like in some corners, I had the feeling it could be also a different version of Venezia. And so I had the feeling like there is something that is very much connected to the book, at least for me. Even if it's like this kind of dark corners, people moving around, and even a small kid that I was also like, which is of course a staged scene, entering the city with a boat and stuff like that. So in India, it became really an open process of thinking and writing down thoughts that I think might be the counterpart to the fictional part. And they come mostly, they were very much influenced from also documentary approach, running around, looking at the city, finding different places. And it has, maybe like in other films, it has something with the kind of an act of flaneur, like a flaneur walking around. And in India, in Varanasi, it's you walk around and you see a lot. Really, it's so intense, and yeah. So, and for the other films, it is a little bit, for example, when I think about the last film I made, Remapping the Origins, as I said, it's more, the approach was a more documentary approach, but there were influential books, but they came really more, it's more a research-based film on historical events. So it's very different from the Ordnung der Träume, I would say. But again, there was an impact why I wanted to make a film about Bialystok, and that was basically really simple, a newspaper article about the city and about that the city was the birth city of Ludwig Zamenhof, the inventor of Esperanto, the planned language that wanted basically that he made to unite people. And then the article was also like how strange it is that the city is now very, very homogenic and not a pluralistic city anymore. And on the other hand, also one of the major cities of right-wing actions in Poland. At least it was like that. It's maybe a little bit changing, but so I was interested, okay, how can a city change in 1 century to a very from a very pluralistic to a very homogenic? What happened in that period, and how can we look on it?
Yeah, and then as you mentioned in the film too, I mean, Bialystok is also, I mean, the birth town of Dziga Vertov too, which is in a way another, I mean, great dreamer of some kind of universal language, some kind of even communism of the images of big equivalents that are gained through montage, the possibility of the kino eye to travel and move from some place to another, from some situation to another, and to compare. And this is interesting, but what you were even saying about Varanasi, because I mean, I think that in that kind of situation, especially, I mean, you're confronted, with a different, with a different world, with this kind of flow of impression and of experience that is kind of alien. I mean, as you say, you feel, I mean, like a Westerner, like an Austrian, you feel kind of stranger. So it's also a question. I mean, the Ordnung der Träume in a way is a question also about resistance. I mean, we also Bialystok and also Remapping the Origin is, and but particularly, I mean, relating to filmmaking, I think it's about a question about the resistance, let's say, against the flow of images which we are confronted every day today in our contemporary visual culture. But in another way, it's also, I mean, the resistance that you find, I mean, that the world opposed to you while you are filming something, in a way. I mean, there's also this kind of estrangement that you can feel. And I'm interested to know something more about this, especially because I see you also, I mean, pose yourself in quite a critical way, and I mean, in terms of self-conscious way, as a voyeur. In this, so especially in a territory where you go into, let's say, ethnographic cinema, even if it's not like that, but still you're in this kind of situation. So I'd like to know better, like, how do you approach these kind of problems, and how also practically you approach your subject, what you want to film.
Regarding resistance itself, I think for me the act of filming is something very resisting. Because also it's maybe the way I shoot, or the way I shoot with my friends, basically, because I'm mostly alone doing the camera and have someone doing the sound. So we're very small and we are very flexible, but this gives you a lot of freedom to really enter spaces, and for me this is an act of resistance, also regarding, let's say, what happens in the film world. But you're right also, like, of course there's sometimes also on the one hand a problem when you go to places and coming from outside, but on the other hand I think that is something that filmmaking can still make, to be a stranger and go to somewhere. And I think it's not a problem as long as you're aware that you're a stranger and that you're entering a space, and how you look around the subject, and if you be aware that you have to be critical with that what you do, basically. I think it's a self-reflection on, okay, I go to India and there is a history of colonialism. How do I deal with it, actually? So it is something that was more problematic for me in India, basically. In Poland, I don't know. It was a little bit different because I saw it from a perspective that is close to the one that we have in Austria. On the one hand, that we are always thought that we are a country that is that failed in a way, and that was very similar to Poland, and that was always, or that was suppressed a lot, which is a kind of a complex that some countries have. I think in Poland it's quite strong. You know, they were always in between the front lines between Germany, Russia, and there's something like that. And I think in Austria it's a little bit the same. But yeah, and the theme resistance itself in the films are sometimes just also coming by I think resistance is something that is not just going out on the street and protest. It's also like how you look at the world and what you what you have to say, basically. It can be, for me, very small. I like small resisting acts, basically. It's not just a protest on the street against, like, the government. It's also like how you talk to someone or how you treat someone, you know, like, or maybe you defend someone, and that's what I like in small kind of acts of resistance. And I hope I sometimes can capture this besides the protest kind of resisting methods. But I'm not sure if I really answered your questions.
I mean, it's also in a way, as I was saying, it's also in a way resisting maybe to film something sometimes. You were mentioning at the beginning that the fact that you work still mostly with 16 millimeters with analog film, this is already, I mean, puts you some limitation in the way you work and in what you have to choose to film in this way. So that's also, I mean, it's not just about what you show in this, but also what you decide not to show.
Yeah. I mean, the good thing about the 60 millimeter material is or at least for me, I have a limitation and I like it. I like to go out and know that it depends which camera I use, but let's say I use the Aton. I have 12 minutes and I really think about if I make this shot or not. And I think already in the camera how I edit. So it's really like also, it for me it's a freedom, although it's a limitation. It sounds strange, but because I was shooting in digital also, and it's I found out that I film too much. I film everything. Like I was, because and with film, this limitation gives me some kind of freedom in a way of looking at the world. But on the other hand, also of what also is interesting is that there are shots or scenes in films where really everything is inside, except the beginning where the camera still maybe has some light is from scene to scene, it's changing. So, but I have scenes that where basically everything is in the scene. So it's very economic on the one hand. But I don't see myself as really a 60mm fetishist, using the material as something like, oh, it's so important. But I like the quality, and it has a really really interesting quality of how people also move differently. When you, for example, do an interview, I tell them, look, we have 12 minutes, or like say 3 minutes for this interview, and the concentration becomes different. Because people really think, I don't know what happens, but I have the feeling they think what they want to say. And in digital, I had the feelings also when I do jobs, which I do a lot besides my film work, like interviews for other people, whatever, that interviews can last for hours. And it's like, okay, but maybe 5 minutes are very interesting. So it is something that I cannot describe, but something happens when you run a 60mm camera. I don't know what, but
yeah. Since I think this a subsequent fulfillment is very interesting because you have, I mean, a direct confrontation with another artist, which is in a way framed. I mean, not framed exactly, but it is in a way. The narrative is exactly the search again for some traces for something that is disappeared. That is, I mean, the life and the work of Ana Mendieta, this Cuban American artist. That was, I mean, the work in itself is very peculiar, and her life story too. And so I just want to know what attracted you to the, story in a way in the first place, and then how this became in a way also like a confrontation and a questioning of your own idea of how you can like make an artwork, like working in the arts in this sense.
Let's start first, like why I made the film basically. I saw an exhibition from Ana Mendieta in Salisburgo in the Museum of Modern Art, and I was really, it flashed me a lot. I never saw an exhibition like that, and I knew her work a little, but not so well. And then I had the feeling like, I read about her, and in the catalog there were a lot of letters also from her, and there was even this quote, a subsequent, happiness is a subsequent fulfillment of a prehistoric wish, which is basically, when I was I'm not sure anymore, but I think it is from Freud, but she wrote it also in one of her letters. And I was interested in making a film about her, but not basically using her or this is a film about Ana Mendieta, but it's, as you said, more a film about an artist that disappeared. And also the question, did the work disappear when an artist dies? Which is, and in that sense, maybe it happened a while for Ana Mendieta, because as far as I remember, for quite a long time, there was not much about her work. So it's a reappearance now in the last 10 years, I think. And that was something that I was really interested also in the connection of her work that deals a lot with identity, death, where do I come from and what is left, especially because she was dealing a lot with her identity, like also as a Cuban American artist and an artist that came to America when she was very young, I think by the Peter Pan action, that was called. And on the other hand, I tried always like find similarities to the present. So when I made the film, and it's very cryptical, it's like you don't see it in the film, or maybe you see it, but it's hard to understand. But there are different things that remind me or that I wanted to connect with her. For example, I made it in 2015, and a lot of people came to Europe in 2015 by over the sea, fleeing from somewhere, crossing the sea. And for example, the dance at the beginning is a dance of a goddess that is the sea of God, the goddess of sea, and so it's all this kind of connections to her maybe, but also to the Cuban dance and to kind of mythology, like not really, but the basically about her and a relation to the present, something like that. So it's when I made the film, basically it was really step by step. I was like filming parts, and I thought like, okay, it is maybe one of the most fragmented films I made, with like really I had a part like this and I had a part like this, but I think I found a way to connect these parts through the voiceover, but also to the idea of someone is disappearing and someone is searching. So yeah, I'm not sure if I haven't talked about the film for quite a long time, so it's always like a little bit different after a while. But maybe what is important in the film as an ending is the question itself. Someone asks you, or in the camera, have you ever lost something? And this is something maybe that is very important. Rather it's a person, or it's something very simple, or rather it's a friendship or something. Like I think this question is very crucial to all of us. We lose constantly something.
And just to close our conversation, I was thinking about, there's another film, in fact, in the program, which is in Platon's cavern, in Platon's Höhle, that we haven't even mentioned, that is probably in a way closer to your, life in Vienna. And so I just want to ask you, to speak about also like how you're living in this very weird time in Vienna. We said that, you used to move around, and now you're in complete lockdown. Your city was shocked by terrorist attacks just a few weeks ago, just horrible, and all of this. And I know also, I don't know if you wish to say something, but that you've been working for quite a while on a film that is actually about your city, about Vienna.
The situation here is, it's strange. After half a year or even longer, you get, in a way, used to it. I don't know if it's really the right word, but I just asked myself recently how it is basically to drink in a bar with a lot of people. I forgot it. And we forget things very fast sometimes. It's also very dangerous, but when I was working during the whole lockdown or the whole summer on my new film, and I was editing, and it's basically not finished but nearly finished. And it was strange because I was filming over 5 years, quite a lot, also on demonstrations, seeing a lot of people. So it was very strange when I saw like images of crowded places, and I was like really, I don't know if it's nostalgic, but I had the feeling that something really changed now, and I'm not sure, or I'm afraid that it's not becoming what it was before. Which doesn't mean everything was better before. It's just like, are we on the edge of a new kind of chapter of in humankind? I don't know. So I was a little bit afraid also, because I think there are mostly some in history there are always some impacts that are really strong and shape a society or kind of how we live together very strong. But besides that, the film, this kind of situation gave me also a new kind of... I looked different on the material I was shooting and on the theme itself. So because it starts basically with the idea of a failed revolution that happened in 1848 in Austria, the March Revolution, which was the only revolution we ever had here. And I was really, I thought like, what does it mean actually nowadays when everything is so restricted? And at that time, everything was also very restricted, but this kind of revolution was for, more press freedom, freedom of speech, etc. And maybe it is a good time to rethink all these things, because they were very, for us it was something that is always present, but we forgot maybe sometimes to think about it. And this is not a critique on the corona measurements, but it's just more a critique on that we should be aware what does it also mean if this happens. So because I think it could be quite difficult to see the future after all this kind of restrictions, and maybe it opens up also a space for some political thoughts that this is possible, and it can be possible again, even without Corona. So, yeah, but all in all, I think we're all quite tired of being in this situation.
I think what is, the actual, the idea of the lockdown and of being stuck in this present is, start to be, affecting us all. And one thing that I find precious about your work is exactly this idea of also, going somewhere else, in space or time together and to save something in order to think about the future. And we hope also to, maybe see you in person in the future in Milan, at the Maker Festival, maybe with this new film that we are very curious to see. And I will thank you for being with us for this time, Johannes, and thanks a lot.
Thanks for the invitation, and we will see each other although I'm a pessimist, I think we will see each other in the future, and I think we will talk face to face, hopefully, with a beer.